Okay, thank you all again for joining. This is a meeting of the work group for Canvas work group, which is working with faculty, making sense of data and working with faculty. That's our official work group title. Today we have Stephen Riley, a member of this group, who has agreed to share with us a demonstration and a presentation about setting up, let's see if I get this right, setting up Canvas outcomes via the bulk upload process. Did I get that right? Okay, awesome. So I'll turn it over to you, Stephen, please.
Thanks, Michelle. Hello, everyone. From chilly Denver, we have been in the teens for the past few days, so got to pull out all my winter clothing finally. So I'm going to share my screen. I do have a PowerPoint that I can share, as well as a CSV document that I'll share, and I can share that either via email or through the chat afterward. So here we go. And then everybody goes away on my screen. This is basically what I have learned so far about uploading outcomes to Canvas using the CSV bulk upload model. So, whoops, if I can, there we go. Just some things we're going to try to cover today, some basics of uploading to Canvas. Format of the CSV file for uploading outcomes. I'll share an example and some problem solving that I've at least figured out to this point. So I don't claim that it's everything to know. So here we go. I'm sure most of you are already aware of this, but I am doing this also for people in my institution. So when you want to upload outcomes for an account, you have to have an admin access. And once you do that, you'll be able to upload outcomes at the highest level of access you have. I have access for the entire university, so I start at the root of the University of Denver, and then we have multiple sub-accounts and sub-accounts below those. So you want to go to the Outcomes tab, and then you want to hit the Import button. That's just some basics. You do want to upload the outcomes to the highest account needed for courses to see outcomes. So, so far what I've done is uploaded them at the University of Denver account and then moved them to sub-accounts. And I've had some success with the moving to sub-accounts, and sometimes it just doesn't work, and my IT professional is helping me try to troubleshoot some of that. But that's the basics of it. This guide that I'm showing you can be found on the Instructure community page. If you want to search CSV file format, these are the fields that can be used, and you'll notice the ones that need to be there or are required at least are checked, and then a short description of what they mean. For me, a lot of this didn't make sense until my IT colleague walked me through kind of what they each do and how they work together. And I'm not sure that I still fully understand like the significance of each, like what happens if you don't have certain things, but the things you have to have are a vendor guide, which tells you what kind of unique identifier the group or outcome have, what type it is, which is either outcome or group. So if you want to load a bunch of outcomes into one group, you set a group, and I'll show you how to do that. And then a title, at least, of the outcome. So the other pieces are permissible, but not required. And I'll show you what we figured out for our system here in a second. So the format as it kind of looks when you open it in either Numbers or Excel, looks like this. And so you'll see the top line is where you have the different column headers. So vendor guide, object type, title, description, display name, calculation method, calculation integer, parent guide, workflow state, mastery points, and then your ratings. And the first line of any group needs to be the group identifier. So such as A, this is for the group. The calculation method defaults to decaying average, but it can be mastery, highest, latest, and average as the way it's calculated. The integer must be a number and must match the ratings that you put later in the group. The workflow state is active or deleted. It defaults to active if there's nothing there. For the group, after the workflow state, everything needs to be blank for it to be identified as a group. And then for the outcomes, again, the vendor identifier for an outcome has to be related to the identifier for the group. So if you use A as the group, A1 for the first outcome would work, but you have to have A in it in some way, shape, or form. The display name is in the outcomes. There's a friendly display name. You can put in a name there. You don't have to have that, but we decided to do it in ours. The parent guide is really important for the outcomes. It must be, it must match the group identifier. So column A on row 2 must be the same as column H for however many outcomes you want in that group. The mastery points is the level of points for mastery. So on a scale of 4 to 0, like I have here, we would say 3 is mastery, and that will help with the calculations. And the way that the ratings are set up, you have a number and then a designator / descriptor. And in ours, I'll show in just a second, we chose to use the capstone, like the AAC and U capstone, then a dash, and then the descriptor of what meets that level. And we went all the way down to a 0 as insufficient. So that's kind of the format that the CSV document needs to be in. And then when you put it in, you have to save it as a CSV format. So you'll work with it in Excel or whatever, but then you have to make sure to save it with that .csv formatting. So here's an example of 2 groups of outcomes that I've put in. These are the AAC and U's value rubrics for civic engagement and critical thinking. And what we decided for our naming convention was to use the first letter of the first word, the last letter of the first word, and the first letter of the second or last word as the group identifier. And then for the outcomes to just number them 1 through however many with that same identifier. We use that identifier, it's saved as CE, sorry, that was an earlier iteration of it. We saved the identifier in the title of the outcome. We use the same group description for these outcomes because each individual outcome doesn't have a descriptor yet that we have written. This was saved, but this actually needs to be CCE1, and in the example I'll show you it does. Here I've put average as the calculation method for this group and highest for the calculation method for this group. You can have different ones in the same bulk upload as long as they're consistent within the group. And then our descriptors, as well as the ratings. And so that's the format you have to have it in, and save it as a CSV file. And then I will switch to live for just a second to show you actually how this works. So in my admin, I go to all accounts, to my University of Denver. Then I click on outcomes. You'll notice some of the outcomes that are there. This is a test environment. Click on the import, and then I'll just go to my upload here. And then we just have to wait for it to do its work. And if you get the green check mark, everything was imported, and you'll just see it here. Just like we wanted it, and those would be available then to import into any course under the University of Denver, which are all our courses, could go and find those. And if we want to move one, we would go to my University of Denver account, Denver outcomes for the College of Business. I can put them into the management department and just move. And then that whole thing is, that whole outcome is moved. Just to note, if you move or delete outcomes, remove outcomes, from the root menu, they're removed or moved anywhere that they are found. So that's just an important thing to note. So yeah.
I have a quick question on that.
Sure,
Is
yeah.
there, because it makes me think, oh, can I copy it? Would there be a reason where I might want to copy it so that I would leave at the highest level, but then maybe copy it into certain ones? Is that an option? And is there a reason to do that? From what you
So
said?
that's a great question. Thanks for asking it. And so far, my work for that is, as far as I can tell, and not claiming universality on this, you can upload it at the root menu and then upload it at the, like, import it at the sub account level. And then they're kind of treated as separate ones, as far as I know. I think if you want to make sure of that, you would need to change the identifier so that there was no way they were linked, if that makes sense.
Gotcha. So you, to your knowledge, it's about uploading them at the separately. You're not really copying. Once it's in there, you're not
That's
copying.
right.
You're doing the upload wherever you need it at whatever layer and level.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So like for the ones that, sorry, I just moved. So if it's under my University of Denver one, any account under there can actually find it and import it into a course. And then from the University of Denver level, I can pull that data up, as long as I have admin and permission, which is something you have to set as an admin for people to be able to pull that data. If you want it just in a sub account, you either need to just load it into the sub account or the sub accounts that you want, and then those sub accounts can see it and upload it, but not every level, if that makes sense.
And that will also affect whether you can aggregate it up, because then it can only
That's
stop
right.
at that sub level, right?
That's right. That's exactly right.
Okay.
And so, yeah, one of the things my IT professional and I were working on was, what permissions do we have to give to like an associate dean of one of our colleges to be able to see all the outcome data for their college without giving them permission to see everything for the University of Denver and for other colleges. And there's a screen that my IT professional has that she can give those permissions to appropriately. So But that's not my area of expertise yet. So
Thank you.
hopefully that helps. But yeah, we have figured out that you can aggregate the data up so long as it's in the right place and you have the right permission to see those reports.
And there is, I'm guessing you might be getting to it, but yeah, Jennifer is asking about how it looks for reporting. You might be getting there at some point, but I just thought I'd let you know it's in there.
Sure. Yeah, no, that's great. And I don't have the reporting in this particular presentation. I was only doing the uploading, but I can, yeah, and the problem is I don't have any courses that I teach with student data to show you, but I can show you where to get the report from. So
I guess Stephen, my question is because you had some unique identifiers in your sub accounts versus generic general titles in some of the other accounts. And so when you're pulling out the reporting in the CSV file, it's not unique. And so I was wondering how it was going to look in the reporting module for those areas, because I know the unique identifiers need to be there in order to associate and aggregate up. But you had a couple of areas where they said like professionalism or in a couple of other things where it wasn't unique. It was just a general statement or a few couple of words. So that's just some more context to my question.
excellent. Thanks for that. So are you referring to the ones I uploaded or the ones that were already in there? Sorry.
You were just showing a screen. I don't know if you want to jump back real quick.
Sure.
It might be easier.
Yep.
So right here where you have under knowledge, professional skills right there. So when you do the export in the CSV, everything's going to come out. And then you have these CE1 dash whatever. All of that stuff is going to come out. So I was wondering how it looks and the differences.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Okay, yeah. Sorry, this is test, and so we've got a few different things in there.
Oh, okay.
From what so if I understand your question right, and what I believe we can do is when they're at the root level, we can run a report on the individual outcome that pulls it up from any place it's used. Is that what you're asking about? Or
I
am I
guess
just
more along
understanding?
the lines of how it actually looks against the data itself. So when I look at the University of Denver, how does that professionalism look or the knowledge look or the skills look in relation to the CE1? Like, are the way that you guys are the mastery levels and the way that you're weighting them, are they comparable when you look at it overall?
Oh,
You see what I
okay.
mean? Because that's you're at the on the outcomes group on the side, you're at the highest level of the hierarchy. So that
Right.
means that from the reporting standpoint, all of those subcategories are coming in. So when I look at it, I was just wondering what the total overall umbrella looked like with all that information.
I see. So okay. I I think I understand your question, Jennifer. Sorry. I want to just make a disclaimer. We are in the process of implementing this, so not everything for certain is going to work when it's. But the way we ran the report, and I wish Aparna was with me today, but she couldn't be. She's in a training. The way we were able to do it. So if you're asking, will these different places be able to tell, yeah, this knowledge, I wouldn't worry about that. But if you're wanting to know, how would we tell like the CE1 diversity of communities and cultures, I think we'd have to do some inter-rater reliability training for the courses. And then when we pull it up, yeah, it'll just pull wherever it's been used. So you won't be able to differentiate like, oh, it's been used in this course, unless you go to that course and pull the report, if that makes sense.
I think so.
Okay, sorry. I may not be answering your question, and I apologize for that.
Well, you just hit on a very interesting. So you're saying you think when you aggregate these up, it's not going to connect. It's not going to show in the report what courses are using it. That's what,
So no,
okay. Or no, I'm
like
sorry.
if you pull it all up, you'll
Mhm.
see it listed by course.
Oh, great, great, okay.
Like, and then you could, I guess, manipulate it however you want to from
Mhm.
that point. Um, I, I'm afraid that what I thought Jennifer was asking is like, if you want to see like a particular course and compare that like to how it is in a different course, because these are like GE outcomes.
Mhm.
How would you do that? And you can, from my understanding, you can see it at the pulled up level, at the highest level that you have it in. If you want to like do comparison, then that gets into what I would understand to be like inter-rater reliability and having some common understandings. But if they're like attached to different assignments, you're just
Right.
pulling up the outcome data, if
Right,
that
right.
makes
Right. Well, and that also makes me think that that next part 2 would also be our other group, which is working with making meaning of data and dashboards and so forth. So to make that data meaningful, because that's often what we're doing is we're exporting it from here after you
That's
built
right.
it and collected it. And then we say, okay, what do we do with this to make meaning, to make, whether it's comparisons and so forth too. So that's, yeah, okay.
We're definitely at the stage of I'm just trying to get them
Just
there.
get it in. Right, the setup.
Get them there and use
Yep.
them.
Okay. Awesome.
And
Thank you.
yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Sorry, let me share my screen again. Sorry, you all went away when I shared my screen, so I couldn't see who I was talking with, and I'm sorry about that. Okay.
No, it's perfect. Thank you. Because I do love that when we get the conversation going, it's great to be able to see each other.
Yeah,
So
no,
thank
that's
you.
right. That's
Thanks.
right. So here are just some troubleshooting things I figured out about how to upload them, right? The first is the CSV format does not like special characters, particularly apostrophes, slashes, colons, semicolons. For some reason, it's okay with commas, but you kind of have two options. You can either kind of rewrite it to work grammatically without those special comments, which I had to do some of with the AAC and U descriptors, or you can, at least in theory, enclose them in quotation marks. The reason I say in theory is sometimes it's worked and sometimes it hasn't worked, and I haven't seen a pattern yet in why it's one way or the other. And I tried different browsers for the uploading, but it feels like it's inconsistent as far as like what you can put quotation marks around. We spent a whole morning trying to figure out why one of our outcomes wasn't loading. And ultimately I had to just delete the whole descriptor and retype it because it wasn't uploading. So that's just a thing to note. There's also a web page on the instruction community that I have linked here about some other errors to just check for. I also found that sometimes when I was putting a large bulk of text in, it either duplicated it sometimes, or then, and I didn't find that until I made the column wrap the text. And then when I tried to upload them with wrap text, it didn't work. So sometimes it's just a little finicky, and I'm not sure why. But the biggest one I've found is that if it has special characters in it, it doesn't like it. So that's pretty much what I had to say. You can reach out to me at stephen.riley@du.edu, and I'd be happy to talk with you through anything or answer questions to the best of my ability. As I've already shown, I'm incapable of answering some things. So,
And we appreciate it, but this is really why the point of the group is that, yeah, we're all learning as we go. We might be stumbling, and thank you so much for being willing to share it in these early stages, really, because we're trying to learn from each other and learn together. And has anyone else tried this process using the bulk upload?
I did. This is Jennifer. That's
Hi.
why
Oh,
I was
wonderful.
asking. So in my test environment, I as well have done some loads in outcomes, but we're under the conversations right now about having standardized assignments, standardized naming convention, standardized message mastery, so that when you aggregate the data, it's comparable because it's all weighted the same, which goes into training and all that stuff. But see, I haven't gotten to the point where I can see the data because I will be looking at it from the highest level down. So I want to be able to see like, oh, this is an alls and alls encompasses this, and look at they're all using this type of assignment because you also have to do the formative versus the summative. And
Mhm.
like, this is how the data is coming in. So I am at the level where hopefully somebody somewhere is testing it to make sure like all of the data is coming out. And the file import is fairly easy. It does work. Like Steven said, if you do go into the sub accounts, I did it at the sub account. So I created the hierarchy of the facility because I want to pull the data all the way back to the top.
Mhm.
So I already created the hierarchy. And then I put in the import into the level that I wanted it in. And then I went
Gotcha.
in and when I did massive updates, I did them at the Excel level and just brought them in that way instead of doing it manually because you can. And I mean, I'm actually the IT person, but I'm
Mm.
doing the bulk of the load for the SLO coordinator up front. And so that, once we get going, then it's just maintenance.
Mhm.
So for me, it's a little bit more um, data and analytic stuff, but it is fairly easy once you get the hang of it. But initially, it is a little jarring because you don't know what you're doing or where it's going. But the good thing is that when you make a mistake and it goes to the wrong level, as long as you catch it, you can move it there. You don't have to re-import it. You just pull it back up to wherever it needs to go.
Mhm. One piece that you said, I want to see if I understand correctly. So if there's a change that you're making to an outcome, let's say, were you saying that you can do that at the CSV? If it's
Yeah.
got the same name, same labeling or naming convention,
Yeah,
you can, because then that way, because if it's already now, it's been pulled into all these different courses and all of that.
correct.
So if you pull it in at that import, it's going to update it throughout. Is that
And
correct?
so, and that's really, I think the plan for us is that
Yeah.
we're going to have a master file.
Mhm.
And when people want to do changes
Yeah.
on their SLO cycle, once we decide what that is, what the SLO cycle looks like,
Right.
um, then hopefully that's where we're going, is where we have the file and the file is really the master change.
Yeah.
And we go into and hey, you want to change them this year, then we're going to change it here and we're going to do the
Yeah.
upload and understand that it breaks the data. It could break the reporting.
Yeah.
That's a level that we're not at either yet, where
Yeah.
we don't know because I want to see it in, we use Nuventiv. And so I want to
Mhm.
see it if it's going to keep it in Nuventiv or if it's going to overwrite it
Right.
and
That's what I was just
disconnect it.
thinking. For the
Yeah,
historical data, you almost
right.
have
For
to
the
leave the
historical.
old, make the new for
Right.
going forward. So you kind of have to do a separate labeling convention, right? If in order to maintain that historical record and then the new ones using the new outcome.
I'm not sure that you want to. It depends on how you want to see the data. So the
Yeah.
build should be reflective of how the data is. So right now we're in the build where we're just
Mhm.
trying to get the CSV in. We're just trying to get the SLOs in for like a couple of courses. But once we get those going and we get the data, the real plan is from the reporting perspective to
Yeah.
backwards build it that way so that
Right.
we get the reporting that we want. But
Right.
we're just not there yet. But
Right. That makes
we
sense.
would have to remove it from Canvas because otherwise the issue is long term is you don't want to have 10 SLO1s,
Yeah.
or ESL.
Yeah.
You can't have 10 there
Right.
living in the system because the
Yes.
instructors will always have access to it because
Right.
that was a discussion.
Right, that makes sense.
Mhm.
Right, so you want to
Right,
export it, that snapshot at the end,
right,
at whatever that time should
right.
be, and then that's saved somewhere else, whether it's Nuventiv, another whatever process,
Yeah.
that's that data, that other piece that the other group works on. And then the live system is for, yeah, that makes sense. Thank you.
Right. And so where Stephen was showing you all, and I had those questions. Well, so when the instructor instructor goes in and they have to do that initial import before they attach it to the assignment, they're going to have access to all of
Yes.
that information. And if they
Yeah.
don't get good training, or,
Yep.
we got part-timers that aren't always available,
Yes.
they can just go in there and click on it, not knowing
Yep.
that maybe that's a retired SLO,
Yeah.
or something we're
Totally.
no longer using. So you really want to think about, I guess,
Keeping
housekeeping.
it streamlined. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's really about housekeeping. So we're hoping that the historical stuff would be inventive,
Yeah.
just
That makes
because
sense.
of the way we use Canvas. And we know that accidents are going to happen, and we know
Yeah.
that some things are going to, fall out, but we want to make it as easy for our faculty so that they'll adopt it. Because if it's seamless, it'll be easy, and
Yeah.
they'll jump on board.
Yeah. And that's exactly why we paired in this topic here, working with faculty and doing the setup, because it is so much about trying to make it as easy as possible, so much about the training. And like you said, there's so much part-time faculty, contingent faculty there's a lot of movement on that area. So yeah, trying to keep it as simple as possible. Thank you so much. That's really helpful. I monopolized what Jennifer. Do you have anything, Stephen, from what she said? That was awesome to hear.
No, it's Jennifer probably should have been doing this presentation. She knows her stuff. But I was going to say to one point Jennifer was making, I know at my previous institution, and I was just on faculty there, but I was in charge of the GE council. What we did is, and this was on the older outcomes model, not the new one that's present. We created a file dated for the year for those outcomes. And then even if it was a copy over, so each year a new file was made for the outcomes to be used. But I know that created even confusion for some faculty as they were trying to figure out how to import. One of the things I'm interested in Canvas, and in the research I at least came across, was both how to lock outcomes into a course using like a template or a blueprint course, and how to send like all outcomes to a set of sub-account courses doing that in a way that couldn't be changed. But I haven't even tried that yet. But there's at least communications on the instructor community about that possibility.
Interesting. Wow. So anyone else in the room who is kind of ready to try this, or like sort of or you think you might be, you're enticed by what you're hearing, what Jennifer and Stephen are talking about, or let's see a question. Oh yes, please, Yvonne.
Hi.
Hi.
Sorry, I came in a little bit late, but I caught, I think, most of the presentation. So thank you so much, Stephen, because that's something that I've been thinking about as we're getting ready to set up outcomes. I'm doing a test right now, or I'm getting ready to do a test, and I'm wanting to do it with 3 different groups. So one is like at a whole program level. So I'm going to do that for one of our nursing programs. And then one is going to be for a subset of gen eds, rather than trying to do gen eds big bang, because that would be crazy, at least for us, because they're not ready for that. And then another one would be a group that I know does external reporting. So I'm focusing right now on nursing, and I was thinking about, okay, how am I going to do that? Because I want to, so we have all of our gen eds. The way I've set it up right now is all of the gen eds are at the root account level. So those SLOs, they're across the board SLOs. So I think that makes the most sense. Anybody, any faculty member can pull those into their courses, and it'll be like super easy. But for nursing, I'm thinking I want to set all of their nursing program level SLOs at the sub-account level. So I was trying to figure out, how am I going to do that? Because of course they have a bazillion, right, for nursing. They're going to have a ton of student learning outcomes. I mean, they have the program level outcomes, which there's not a ton of those. But then when you think about the course level outcomes, I'm trying to figure out, how am I going to connect those in the system so that when we do the reporting on the back end, that the reporting will show the connection between the program level outcomes and the course level outcomes, so that a sub-account admin can pull it, rather than me having to pull every report, because I'm the only one here who would be doing that. It's like for the whole
Right.
our whole school. So I don't want to be the one who's pulling it every single time for every single program for every single faculty member, because that could be that's a whole job.
Yeah.
And I already have 3 jobs in one, so I don't need to add a 4th one. So yeah, so I'm getting ready to test it out, and I'm going to be really interested to get the PowerPoint, and I'm assuming that this is recorded so I can listen to it again. Because, and Stephen, I may be reaching out to you because I'm going to be doing it in our test environment. I certainly don't want to put anything that's that could be played with at this point. You know, people will see it. There'll be at least one faculty member who'll go, "Oh, cool," and then you start pulling stuff, and it's like not even done yet. So I may be reaching out to you just to maybe kind of look over my shoulder and see what I'm populating in, just at like that high level, if you'd be willing to do that.
Absolutely, Yvonne. I would be happy. I mean, I think there are plenty of people who could help, but yeah, absolutely. And from, if I again, I try to say this, if I understand your question correctly, one of the things I'm not entirely sure how to do, and this is somewhat to Jennifer's point, is how to see. So I know how to do it from a faculty side, like in my own course, like see the report related to an assignment. That's easy to do. I'm not sure if you've got an outcome across multiple courses using different assignments, how you're going to reconcile that, anything other than training, and then on the, once you've pulled it out, doing interpretation of it. But as far as like, if you've got course level outcomes to program and to even university wide level, the easiest thing I know to do is for the faculty to have a rubric, even if the rubric is just the outcomes, not any other like analytics that they want to run on it, and have those outcomes all attached to the same assignment, that then you have curriculum mapping to. And again, it has to do with how you pull that data out. As far as who can pull the data out, and this is the question I thought I was answering that may not have been helpful. I do know that at the Aparna, my IT colleague, has shown me at least how we can do it for an associate dean of a college, how to be able to pull reports from any course in their college, because if the data is not accessible, it's the same problem as trying to upload the outcomes, right? It's like, if it's not something that can be shown how to do. But I do know that that's at least possible, giving the right permission to a particular person who may or may not have admin at any other level to pull those reports.
Yeah, so I'm just kind of in the process of figuring all of that out and working with, we actually are working with a trainer from Canvas out in Structure, just because I wanted to make sure I'm setting it up correctly rather than trying to go in and, you know, this to me is not one of those trial and error things. Like there's a lot of things that I can figure out and just intuitively you can, you know, kind of work your way through it. This is not one of them. So anyway, that's kind of where we're at right now. We're just in the infancy stage of trying to implement Canvas outcomes.
And my understanding too, and I think you were speaking to this, Stephen, a bit, and even as you were framing your question, Yvonne, so the course level outcomes, right, they exist at the course level and they really are just contained within that course. And my understanding is that, because you wouldn't have a whole set of course level outcomes that would be existing at the same level as program, where multiple faculty would pull different course levels into their
that's
course,
what I'm
right?
actually what I'm thinking about doing.
That's what it sounded like.
I want to put, or at least in the test, this is what I'm going to test out this week, is pulling in all of the nursing program level and course level outcomes and setting it up so that how do I describe it? So like when you look at the hierarchy, you've got, so I'll do this at the sub account level instead of at the root level. So I'll have the nursing program SLOs, and then underneath that, I'll have each separate course that's within that program, so that the faculty member, well, all they'll have to do is click on that little, the little carrot, that little arrow, and they will see all of the course level SLOs for the course that that they teach.
Right.
Because we do have a lot of adjunct faculty, so I want to make it as easy as possible for them to pull it in. So if we have a new adjunct faculty come in to teach a nursing class, they're not going to have to reinvent the wheel. They're not going to have to have me do it for them.
That makes sense. So it's really just facilitating that, because you guys have the curriculum is so structured that every single course, those course outcomes. So it's really just almost like label it so they can just pop it in and then they're in there. And then this is the part I think is the mapping to the program level up, because
that to me is like the big question mark at this point is how do we generate those reports so that you're not having to pull a different report for each separate course and then pull your program level report and then try to like figure out manually how to merge that data together so that it makes sense.
And as a in the curriculum you already have all that mapping done from course level to program also. So that's a great question.
So how to emulate that in
Canvas.
Exactly.
Without having to go, without somebody manually, you or the faculty or whoever, having to say, okay, I know these 3 course level outcomes go to this program, so let me pull the program and pull it in. I got you. That is
because I created a curriculum map last year in preparation for this. So I created a curriculum map format that they could use that's like really simple. It's an Excel. But it's just a way that you can see like everything at the top is you've got your program level SLOs, your course level SLOs are right next to it, and then your institutional SLO that it all maps to. So it's all like at the top of the spreadsheet. And then the bottom of the spreadsheet is all the detail level where they actually plug in, okay, these are all of my assessments, these are all of my activities, and this is which SLOs each of those connects to, so that they could have like, it's basically so I could have one source of truth for the curriculum map rather than having every department having their own version. And some are on spreadsheets and some are on Word docs, literally Word docs. I was like, really, how do you collect that data? So that was like phase 1 for me it's kind of like we had to do pre-work in order to even to get ready to put it into Canvas outcomes. Yes.
Well, then that's the great benefit, like Stephen touched on and Jennifer too, about like determining the naming convention and having it consistent. A lot of that is really important. And then Sarah, we do have a worksheet that from the presentation that we had done at the SLO talk that Sarah has shared, and I can reshare that again, or we and that's sort of the basics. But Yvonne, if you would please keep us posted on what you learn with that, especially since you're working with your Canvas consultant, you said, right? So that would be wonderful. I think a lot of people will find that really useful and helpful. I'm trying to keep an eye on the chat but also listening to, you can't really read and listen to details, that kind of thing to be able to engage. But I know, well, and one person did mention, I wanted to go back to also because Stephen mentioned this, because you were talking about who can run the report. So that it's also about, it's the setup, like you were saying, the mapping, but then also that permissions level and who, right? So that you're not the only person pulling those reports. So that touches on what Stephen was talking about too in the setup and who has the permissions. But Nargis had mentioned, I think she may have deleted it but I think it's worth underscoring again. When it's at the course level, really only the faculty, unless Stephen, like as Stephen said, if somebody has special permission to go into the course, right? Whether it's a TA or maybe somebody else who's been added, but basically that can only be run at the course level by the faculty. So just to keep that in mind as well. And then I know, Lena, you had a question up here about insights and eLumen. I guess it's the same, and whether anybody's using that. So that's good to hear that there's a pretty good integration going on with Canvas outcomes. Has anybody else familiar with that or using that? This was one of our conversations too in the big group before we broke into our small groups. We were I have to check in and see. I think I don't know if this project got sidelined, but somebody, I think Yarrick and I'm forgetting who else, but I have it written down, was going to try to give us sort of a sheet with all these different softwares and what works and who, sort of just to map it out, because everyone is trying to figure out what's the best one to use or what for your needs and so forth. And I know eLumen has come up before. But anyone in this room can speak at all to that or any experience with that? Or Lena and or Aaron, if you want to clarify the question a little bit more. I don't know.
Yeah,
Thanks. Appreciate it.
so I went to a webinar last week about that because one of the things that we're wrestling with the implementation of Canvas outcomes is, so once we have this set up, hopefully one day we'll have it, set up properly. So we're working through that, but long term, like how do we make this accessible and automated, so I know that we have this CSV report that we can download, we can connect it to Tableau and kind of visualize it and create reports through those, through the Excel, the CSV file that you can download from Canvas outcomes. But we wanted to see if there's a process where we can actually automate this, I guess, less, we don't want to have as much of a, we don't want to touch the data too much. And so we were thinking about like, what are some of the things we can do to automate this process? And for some reason, I don't know who, I think it was from this group, I got a notice about this webinar and it just seems so amazing. So, it integrates to Canvas outcomes. So it's like these two products, software are working together. So you capture the data through Canvas, is the way we're talking it here. You set it up, you do all this setup process, and then eLumen or Insights come in and kind of transforms all these data and visualizes it for you. So it does all the work of like, like the questions that we have here, like does this connect with this and this, all these different connections and how you want to report it, how you want to make it accessible. So it does all these dashboards. It also incorporates, I'm not pitching or selling.
Yeah. I know. You just saw it. You just saw the demo. I got you.
Really cool. And so it just sounds really amazing, but I don't know, like if anyone has had any experience, because it really looks like a very complete tool. It also has like curriculum mapping features and assessment plans. Mm-hmm. So it just seemed very complete. And I was just wondering if anyone has any experience with it before we actually move forward with learning more about it from the webinar.
Right. I feel like I remember at least one person. It might be
Insights.
From maybe in the other group, because that's sort of the data and dashboards group. Some of them may have played with that a little bit. I'm thinking it might be Lico. I think had mentioned that maybe. I can go back to the notes too, because I do remember writing in that one meeting where I did very detailed notes, one of our first meetings. The topic came up and people were throwing out different softwares. And so I remember keeping track of who was saying what. So I think if you want to go back also, I shared those notes. So if you have them. But yeah, that's a great question. And there's a lot of what folks are trying to figure out. Should we do it homegrown, which is kind of what the other group is, like, how do we do it if we're going to use Power BI or Tableau? If you have a Tableau license, that's not cheap if you don't have a Tableau license, but a lot of people have access to Power BI and sort of doing it homegrown, or, leveraging maybe some of these software tools that can be very expensive. And then the onboard, as we all know, I think we've all probably been involved in adopting some sort of software, including Canvas or any other LMS products that, the onboarding and the training and then the upkeep and everything. So those are really big questions, and the time commitment, but also cost, of course, for our institutions. So these are, really important questions I think everyone's grappling with. But I guess no one in this room has any more to add on that. Let's see what else. Yes, Chaffey College. Thank you, Yvonne. They actually, it was a presentation by Chaffey College, probably, I want to say 2 years ago now, one of the early ones when the SLO talks were launched during the work from home during the pandemic. A person who was at Chaffey was really the one where I was like, wow, this is amazing. Like, and a couple other folks said, oh yeah, I'm struggling with this too. And that's how we kind of started the very, very, very beginnings of this group. Started out of a presentation with Chaffey College. I don't think, it's not Jessica, Jesslyn. I don't remember. I don't think she's there anymore, but yeah, they're doing some good stuff there. I just don't have a contact there anymore. So if anybody does, maybe Yvonne knows, but great point there. What else? Let's see. Aaron, capacity in terms of workload? Or, oh, yes, investigating pricing. Do you want to say anything more, Aaron? I know you're active in the chat.
Just that we are going to
Yeah.
be meeting with our institutional effectiveness and analytics office this week just to see what their capacity is, because we do have Power BI, but I'm not sure what their capacity is to take this on.
Yeah, definitely. That's definitely a big issue, I think, everywhere. Great. Thank you. Any other thoughts or questions on this topic? So this also, by the way, is our last meeting of this year for this group, just as a reminder. And we're going to keep the times the same in the spring. We haven't sent out the meeting invitations yet. I'm hoping maybe to not always be the one to host the invitation. So that's why we were waiting, since we have co-leads for both groups now. So stay tuned on that. I'll pause the recording, I guess, or stop it, I guess, and then do the last of the announcements. Should I record the announcements? I don't know. I'll stop it. Let me see real quick if I can find the button. Goodness gracious. What the heck? Stop recording. Okay. Well, I guess before I say that, I do want to say thank you. I'm not wrapping yet, but thank you again to Stephen, and just for such a great conversation too, and the great points that everyone made. This is really, what makes the group so great. So I appreciate that. I'm going to stop the recording now.